What is the legal repercussion of getting your first DUI in Indiana? So every DUI case is actually 4 cases. When a person's arrested, there's an immediate license suspension. We call that the pre-conviction suspension. This is an administrative suspension from the BMV, and by default, it's 180 days if there's no refusal. It's going to be 1 year if there is a refusal, and 2 years if a person has a prior DUI. And this refusal suspension is not fun. It's not easy to get around by any means. There's some other articles and videos we'll hyperlink in the entry below. So that's the first part, the immediate license suspension. And then there's the actual criminal case. And DUIs start as C misdemeanors with a maximum of 60 days in jail. However, most DUIs are actually A misdemeanors because the only difference between an A misdemeanor and a C misdemeanor is a little bit of dangerous driving. Now, people always say, Mark, well, I wasn't driving dangerously. Well, I agree for the most part, but Indiana law is very, very harsh on this topic. But basically, a little swerve, that's danger. You're weaving within your road. So you're in your lane of travel. You don't cross center line, but you're weaving. That's danger. You're going above 15 miles an hour. That's dangerous. You know, the reality is everybody weaves within their lane. The world is round. It's impossible to travel on a perfectly straight line. Other states have actually acknowledged this. Indiana is holding out though. And it's very easy to get from a C misdemeanor to an A misdemeanor with this little bit of dangerous driving. If your case is a felony, that means you've had 2 DUIs within 7 years, or if it's your first DUI, if you have a passenger under the age of 18, that's going to be a felony. Again, pops up, the maximum is now 2.5 years in jail. If somebody gets really hurt or dies, things can get much more serious, much faster, but give us a call if you're dealing with that. The minimum for any DUI is actually 0 days in jail, but if a person has a prior, they have to do 5 days or 240 hours of community service work. If they have more than one prior, so this is their third, they have to do 10 days in jail or 480 hours of community service work. You might see other attorneys with blogs saying less community service work, but that number actually increased in the past couple of years. So the 240 and the 480 is actually the correct numbers. And those community service hours and mandatory minimum jail times are from the federal government to Indiana, basically saying, hey, if you guys want road funds, you've got to do this mandatory minimums for subsequent offenders. Now, there's 2 big issues. You know, people sometimes call me, hey, Mark, it's my 3rd DUI. Just give me those 5 days and let's be done with it. Unfortunately, the state typically wants much more than the mandatory minimum. And the second big issue is community service work is a great idea, especially people that have jobs, but the problem is it's a lot of community service work. And the second problem is not all judges will actually do it. And it's not like an either or option. It's the judge can always reject the sentence. And so it's not always a possibility. But, you know, some people really do need to do that community service work, and we'll always fight. You know, we're talking more about first-time DUIs, but I mean, if you have multiple DUIs, you could get the habitual vehicular substance offender. That gets kind of scary because, you know, maximum time in jail if they file that is 10.5 years. And now some people call me, Mark, that's impossible. There's no way I'm going to go to jail 10.5 years on my 3rd DUI. And, you know, for the most part, they're right. But Indiana Court of Appeals in the past year in a 2020 case said 5 years in jail for a 3rd DUI is A-okay. So just keep that in mind. So that's the criminal case. Now, the third issue with your DUI, it's the post-conviction license suspension. You might be able to tell driver's license is a tricky issue with DUIs. The maximum license suspension follows the maximum sentence of the crime a person is subsequently convicted of. So, for example, if you've been charged with a misdemeanor DUI because a little bit of dangerous driving, the maximum time in jail is 365 days. The maximum license suspension matches that. So the maximum license suspension would be 365 days. The minimum is 0, but that gets a little bit tricky because if you have a prior DUI anytime in your life, the minimum is now 1 year, even if that prior DUI was decades ago. And a DUI conviction suspension is always served after any and all refusal suspension. So it's an actual separate suspension. You don't get double credit for the refusal and the DUI suspension. There's a whole separate rules for people with commercial driver's license. So there's other blogs and videos I've done about that. Keep that in mind. The good news is that license suspension, there's actually lots of good news. The first bit of good news is, the judge does give you a year license suspension because of whatever, and that's at the conviction date. Any time you've done before you were convicted with your license suspended counts towards that suspension. So for example, you get arrested for DUI and you get the 180-day license suspension administratively at the beginning of the case. The judge, for some reason, gives you a year license suspension when you're convicted. If you've already served 180 days of that suspension, then you get 180 days credit. If you only served 90 days, then you get 90 days credit. So that credit gets applied to the conviction suspension at the end of the case. Also, the biggest piece of good news is for most license suspensions that don't include refusals, but as long as it's not a refusal, specialized driving privileges is usually an option. Not all counties and judges do it, but a lot do. So we likely can get you driving for life's necessities. I always call it a specialized driving privilege. It's not the license you want, it's the license you need. It'll get you to and from work, to and from hospital appointments. Sometimes judges let you take kids to school and whatnot, grocery store, but it's, again, license you need, not the license you want. So now we're down to the fourth and final legal repercussion for a DUI case. And basically it's administrative issues that the Bureau of Motor Vehicles is going to make a person who got a DUI charge get SR22 insurance. That's basically proof that you have insurance for the next 3 years. If you have a bad driving record, so maybe you get a bunch of speeding tickets, but basically if you get 1 DUI plus 9 moving violations within 10 years, you lose your license for 5 years. It's pretty easy. You want to make sure people are looking at your BMV record and know what's going on. If you have a terrible driving record, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but if you have a bad driving record, so you get a DUI, but you have some other criminal acts on your BMV, maybe not even DUI, maybe it's leaving the scene of an accident or reckless driving, but basically 3 crimes involving your vehicle within 10 years, you're going to lose your license for 10 years. There's ways we can get you driving through specialized driving privileges, but this is something that comes at the end of the case, and it a lot of people get blindsided by this. Not us, because we're trying to stay ahead of it for our clients. The third BMV issue at the end of the case is the proof of financial responsibility. You're likely going to get a little postcard in the mail saying, hey, proof to us you had insurance. And you actually have to get that proof to the BMV from your insurance company. And it's going to be for the day of the DUI. Not a big deal, but it's something that falls through the cracks pretty easy. And then last but not least for this administrative issue is points. DUI results in points. And anybody that gets too many points is going to get a letter from the BMV saying, hey, you got too many points, we're watching you. If you keep getting points, then they're going to have a hearing and then they're going to put your license on probation or administratively suspend it. If you get too many points, you definitely want to use the driver safety class. You can actually reduce your points by like 4. You do that every couple of years, but you definitely want to watch your points and, make sure. What we just did right now is a giant overview of legal repercussions for a DUI offense. If you have any questions, just give me a call, 317-632-3642. I love talking about DUI law, DUI issues, DUI licenses. It's just what I've made my career on. So don't be shy about giving me a call. And most importantly, remember, always plead the fifth.